Brought to you by Charity Mobile, the phone company that supports life and family. 5% of your monthly plan price goes to your favorite charity. Buy the way you believe at CharityMobile.com and use promo code TRADITION.
It's easy to get stressed about the conclave. It's easy to have anxiety about it. After all, we hear conflicting things. On the one hand, Cardinal Parolin, the heir apparent, has all the votes he needs locked up already. On the other hand, there's serious pushback, and the conservative cardinals all seem better organized than they did the last time around, and Parolin has no chance. Around and around and around we go. While this is happening, voices on both sides, among the bishops, cardinals, influential priests, and influential laity, are chiming in, trying to get the cardinals to vote the way they want them to vote. And the side that desperately wants a Francis II is overplaying their hand, possibly. We'll find out very shortly together as the conclave is set to begin this week. But last week, one of the worst bishops in the United States published a letter gushing over how Pope Francis showed the way to help him see the souls and the hearts of that group of folks that James Martin spends an inordinate amount of time thinking about. Not trying to get them to convert, but getting the church to convert to their way of thinking. It's all very strange and unbecoming for a bishop. And the bishop in this question is Bishop Stowe of Lexington. Here is his open letter he wrote on the New Ways Ministry website. If you don't know who that is, New Ways Ministry is one of the most infamous organizations in the United States. They have advocated for that same subject that James Martin spends an inordinate amount of time thinking about for a priest. And they've been to the point where they have actually been condemned in the past by the bishops of the United States. And so now we have a bishop from the United States writing an open letter to this organization, which was then published on their website at newwaysministry.org. Here is that letter. We'll talk about this to give you an idea of what it looks like sometimes when those who should remain silent decide not to remain silent and may be undermining their own will and their own goals. The headline: Bishop John Stowe, Pope Francis inspired me to listen to the James Martin crowd. And there's Bishop John Stowe at some kind of New Ways Ministry thing. Here it is. Bishop John Stowe of Lexington, Kentucky attends the Outreach, which is James Martin's personal organization, Catholic Ministry Conference at Fordham University in June of 2022. Here is John Stowe in his own words. Pope Francis's departure from this life on Easter Monday allows our remembrances of this great pastor to be more hope-filled than somber. We gratefully remember this pastor who taught and showed us that the church is called to be ever more inclusive. His oft-repeated phrase, todos, 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 referred to questions about membership in the church, recipients of God's mercy, and was usually in response to those who felt entitled to limit the scope of God's all-inclusive love. The provocative question from his early pontificate, who am I to judge, will long be remembered as Pope Francis's indication of a new opening to the issues James Martin spends too much time thinking about in the church. Clearly, there were many whose expectations were raised by this phrase, only to be disappointed by the lack of a definitive change in church teaching. But I think Pope Francis knew very well that the walk must come before the talk. That is, new attitudes of inclusion and lived experience will lead to new ways of reflecting upon that experience and new ways of formulating the questions and answers that arise. Francis was sometimes criticized for his quick quips because they could mislead or had not been thought through when uttered. But the seemingly offhand remarks often resonated, stirred discussion, and provided food for reflection. Who am I to judge certainly did all of that. The question posed by the one whose judgment actually was being sought is rather suggestive. His reply to the reporter's question revealed that he looked at the whole person first, with their life of faith and desire to live that faith, and that he leaves any judgment to the all-merciful one. It also implies a critique of those people of faith who somehow believe that they are able to judge another standing before God. Consistent with his Ignatian formation, Pope Francis begins with the cura personalis, the concern for the person, before looking at the class or category to which one belongs. Pope Francis sought to form pastors ready to accompany people and discern with them how to be better disciples. Again, the walk must come before the talk. He wanted everyone to be able to seek direction from pastors and pastoral ministers without fear of condemnation, and he promoted the importance of truly listening as the first step of discernment. Let's pause here. Truly listening as the first step of discernment. That's not my experience with Pope Francis. Is that yours? There were entire segments of the Catholic Church he did not listen to. For instance, people who feel that they were called in life to spread the gospel, to bring souls to the church as God's instrument for conversion. We know that he publicly kind of smacked down somebody who said, "Oh, look at these people that I helped bring into the church." And he chastised them and called spreading the gospel in that way solemn nonsense. Proselytizing, he called it. He has gone on the record in other places telling people of other religions to just be the perfect member of your religion. You don't need to become Catholic. None of that's Catholic talk. None of that is a Catholic attitude. That is anti-gospel stuff. It's not the walk we need a pope walking. It's certainly not a talk we need a pope talking either. And of course, the other group he never had time for were meanie-headed, rigid traditionalists. People who wanted the same Catholic faith that our ancestors all had. We didn't get listened to either. Certainly, he didn't walk with everybody. He walked with certain people who are real big with the secular authorities these days. Said, let's go back to Bishop Stowe. And I will ask you here, do you think what he's saying is going to help the College of Cardinals to give us another Pope Francis? Here's the bishop. From his first introduction to the world on the night of his election, he described himself as having been brought from the ends of the earth to Rome. In that simple phrase, he indicated the perspective he would bring as universal shepherd, one who comes from the margins and who pays attention to those on the peripheries. His references to the marginalized were very broad and inclusive, and he certainly came to know how marginalized the James Martin types could be in the church. In 2015, when Pope Francis came to the United States, he instructed bishops to proclaim the risen Christ and to share the message of God's mercy with everyone. More pointedly, he said that everything we say and do should convey mercy. The following year, he proclaimed a year of mercy and called us to be creative and outreach towards those who feel excluded from the church. It was precisely because of that call to go to the margins and convey God's mercy that I first accepted, in the year of mercy, the invitation to speak to a New Ways Ministry conference. I was not at all surprised to find an audience of fervent believers formed in the richness of our Catholic faith, who were eager to hear a word of affirmation and to know that they are seen and cared for. I found that a simple reflection of Jesus' actions on the margins and criticism he received resonated profoundly with this James Martin community and their loved ones. When I was hit with an avalanche of emails from across the country and beyond, demanding to know whether I proclaimed solid church teaching when addressing New Ways, I had no difficulty affirming that I had. I believed that what they were really asking was whether I pronounced judgment on their lifestyle and whether I reiterated the condemnation of such activity outside of sacramental marriage. But this audience was all too familiar with the catechisms describe of such acts as gravely sinful and disordered. They hadn't heard nearly enough of the same catechism's affirmation of their dignity as beloved children of God, who should be protected from discrimination. It did not take long before I received an inquiry from the nunciature, noting the complaints that had been received about my speaking engagement. I prayed about the content of that letter and about what kind of response it required. I wondered whether I was to take it as a warning to go back and never do this again, or as an opportunity to explain and or defend myself, or simply inform me that I was being noticed. My discernment led me to respond straightforwardly and describe how I was doing exactly what Pope Francis had called for in the year of mercy. This was affirmed by the nuncio with words of gratitude. But the far greater gratitude came from many James Martin types who simply felt seen, acknowledged, and affirmed in their dignity and their pilgrimage of faith. Pope Francis inspired me to take a risk. More importantly, Pope Francis inspired me to deeply listen. The more I listened to these types, the more I was touched by their depth of faith and their desire for love and inclusion by the church. And the more I listened, the more I felt their pain from harmful phrases like intrinsic disorder, along with the judgment of strangers who assumed much about their private activities without knowing the persons they were judging. Francis did not minimize the struggles nor dismiss the genuine sentiments of this community. Even as he continued to denounce what he called the ideology of the flesh, he regularly received and interacted with such confused persons. He met with James Martin type pairings, including former students of his in the Vatican and in other parts of the world. He offered a listening ear, an affirming embrace and profound respect for each person. It is this walk that will be the legacy of Francis, who ushered in a new era of openness. And his letter. The people he's talking about are seen. The secular authorities celebrate them, lionize them, make them out to be the ideal citizen. New Ways Ministry is an organization that has said the church is wrong about the sin that cries out to heaven for justice that James Martin has an unhealthy interest in for a Catholic priest. New Ways Ministry, Outreach, James Martin's organization, and James Martin himself have all said that the Bible got it wrong. St. Paul was wrong, meaning that they believe that the Bible is not inerrant. That's heresy. Kind of wish the papal nuncio at the time had actually taken action against Bishop Stowe. The question I leave you with this. Here we are, about to have the conclave begin. What effect will this have on this? I don't expect a major effect, but it's part of a cascade, a sort of an avalanche. The modernists are pushing hard to continue the work of Francis. Are they pushing too hard? Let me know what you think of this in the comments, please. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't. Certainly helps. So to sharing this on social media, that helps a lot too. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.